What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. On a cold and snowy Friday in New York City, we're coming live from Brooklyn. Before I bring my guest on today, the message this week, this is something I've heard. I think it was Simon Sinek, but I might be mistaken. And it's an idea we're going to dissect through the course of the show. And it was about business and business mortality. And this particular business personality said most business fatalities are the result of suicide, not homicide, meaning that internal mechanisms are what make businesses not survive. But these days, there are a lot of outside forces, and that may or may not be the case. So we're going to talk that through today. I'd like to welcome to the show the executive director of the Ave Sunset Park BID. We'll talk a little bit about what a BID is in a few. He's also a friend and neighbor. We've participated in the Winter Terrace Food Co-op as well. David Estrada. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremiah, how are you? I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Likewise. We talked about this a couple of times and it finally has come to fruition. So it's great to finally get together and do this. Why don't you start by giving everybody just a little bit of background about yourself, how you ended up in these particular roles, and also just a little bit about what a BID is for those that do not know.
Okay, that's a tall order. So I'll knock that out quick.
Brief.
I'm a 35-year Brooklyn resident, but a Southern California boy. Went to school out there, pulled a really good BA in theater arts from Cal State University, Long Beach. I worked in the arts for several years, literally ran away with a circus to Europe for some years.
Somehow I'm not surprised by that.
I have danced on stilts wearing Balinese costumes and playing conga drums in Salzburg. I have done this. Then I came back to New York and decided to pay the bills. I did about a 20-year stint in corporate America. Bounced around a bit, but I ended up with a company that does human resources consulting, including entrepreneurial coaching, called Lee Heck Harrison. So no longer with them, it's been many years. And then I decided to pivot to public service. So I ran a city council campaign and my guy got in, and in Sunset Park, where I work now, and I was chief of staff there. A lot of people who aren't in New York don't realize our city council members wield an inordinate amount of power over our daily lives because they're the conduit for so much funding that comes to neighborhoods. And then I took over here at the Sunset Park Business Improvement District. So that's BID, 76 of them in New York. You might have heard of Times Square. Or the Downtown Alliance, or Union Square, or Bryant Park. So these are like if a Chamber of Commerce and a water district had a baby, right? So we're ombudsmen and boosters for small business and quality of life, but we're funded by a little tick voluntary assessment that is placed on the property tax of every building within the geography of our defined areas. These 76 BIDs in New York City account for something, I think the last statistic I saw was 25% of all the sales tax revenue takes place in one of these BIDs or another. So it's important. We're covering important spots. But it does range from places like Times Square itself to a little commercial strip like Fifth Avenue in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, between 39th and 64th, working class, immigrant, tough, hard scrabble neighborhood, plucky people, bold shop owners, and also highly impacted recently. So it's kind of like a Chamber of Commerce and ambassadorial role for a very specific geography. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully it makes sense to the people that are listening, because do like small towns have BIDs?
Yeah, you might feel it in your town in a different sense. It could be a merchant association, or it could be a neighborhood improvement group. And this model of business improvement districts exists all over the world. At the last time we could have a face-to-face convention, we had folks from Australia and Scotland and Southeast Asia and all over. So these places exist all over, and it's a way of self-organizing. Most importantly for me, it's a way, like when you and I pay our property taxes, me through rent, I don't know if you own, that money goes in the general coffers and we don't have much to say about how it gets spent. But when you self-impose a little fee, a couple $100, $400, $500 a year on a building, that money gets spent right there on the avenue. So it's a way of having a greater degree of control over part of the money you give up to help organize the city.
And not for nothing, an area like Sunset Park, and especially where the BID that you're executive director of along Fifth Avenue, I mean, it's a high concentration of businesses compared to maybe like a main street in a small town, right? I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of places like on top of each other right there.
And this isn't the central business district of New York, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying.
What people like to call the outer boroughs, as if, dinosaurs are roaming the streets. But I have over 300 storefronts in a 26-block stretch.
Right.
Often our storefronts are relatively small, 1,500, 2,000 square foot ground floor, but they might only have an 18 or 25 foot frontage.
Right.
So, this is when people talk about mom and pop shops, how all politicians love to do that, right? Before they walk away and screw us. I don't know if I can use.
You can curse. Okay. Yeah, no, we can say whatever we want.
I'm going to keep it NC-17 because my 4-year-old's in the next room. But when people talk about mom and pop shops, this is it. These are sole proprietors. They're immigrants. They're often not English dominant. They're sometimes in mixed immigration status families. They're definitely serving people with mixed immigration status these are working families. Not typically not national retail brands, although we have a few franchisees and so forth.
Right.
There's a McDonald's on the block, sure. But these are typically sole proprietors and really labor of love, people who just muscle it through in a very, very intense regulatory environment. I mean, people talk about other places, but New York City has a special flavor of torturing anyone who wants to run a business. You know this more than I do. Right?
I do. I never labeled it as torture, but that's kind of what it feels like.
It is, really, isn't it? Or at least gaslighting, or I don't know the right word, but it's a form of abuse. Honestly, it is, and it's tough because folks have. It's the alphabet soup of agencies, DCA, DOH, DOB, DOT, DSNY, sanitation, health,
environmental protection,
on and on and on. And, that's only become more intense when you add on top of it the urgency of pandemic response. Yeah. So we're in a, you mentioned mortality or death by suicide as opposed to murder. Although I'd say maybe starvation is sometimes also a leading cause, just dying on the vine, good ideas. But right now, all bets are off. Everything's different. Long established businesses that for whatever reason had a sustaining model over time are failing. Brand new starts are failing. And yet people are opening stores in the middle of all this. I have people open a shoe store, a dress store, an empanada place, a couple of bodegas that specialize in vegetables, fruits and vegetables. Some healthcare professionals have come in. So what's really interesting is right when we're crying about vacancy, we have people leasing up.
Yeah.
So, the beat goes on and the wheel will turn, but it's going to get bad.
That's another, to quote Simon Sinek again, one of his ideas is the infinite game, where it's just the wheel is always turning. You might be in it or you might not, but like commerce always happens. Like you said, the beat goes on. Like it's still all happening.
But from our mortal perspective, it's New York City, it's business, and there are winners and losers.
And it's always been, like pretty cutthroat. I've always said, if you can open a business and survive successfully for some years in New York City, you could probably do it anywhere because the regulations are so steep and everybody's sticking their fingers in your pocket and it's high competition. Just everything is elevated here.
It's like those nature shows, right? So the margins are thin. The operating circumstances are difficult. The operating costs are high. The regulation is intense, but there's such an intense flow of commerce in good times in New York City. Yeah. My zip code 11218 right here in good old Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn has far more people than the capital of Montana, or far more people than like many cities. We got 150, 200,000 people who live within a stone's throw of here. So what's happened is because of the pandemic, that volume of just resource flow that a lot of marginal businesses sustained on has been pulled back. And what we're doing is we're not creating unprecedented difficulty. We're exposing the difficulties that these small businesses had all along. It's just now they don't have cash to throw at the problem or a new product they can put out, and they've lost their room for maneuver just because the money's not flowing. Right? In the retail sense.
And I said that from the beginning. Like this was very exposing because people, were trying to continue in good times. I mean, it was a relatively good economic situation we had, especially the last 8 years, I'd say, since 2012. Kind of this escalating growth for both retail and service and industry. You have some industrial production happening in that area of Sunset Park too, right?
Sure, very, very nearby in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. For people who don't know it, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, by the way, so come and visit. It ranges from the old industrial waterfront on New York Harbor with a view of the Statue of Liberty and these giant, immense, multi-million square foot manufacturing buildings that everybody's trying to figure out what to do with, right up to little row house, brownstone, three-story, 25-foot wide apartments, chock-a-block in a residential neighborhood. We have the second largest Chinatown, the third largest but fastest growing Chinatown in New York. We have multi-generational Latino families from like Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, who've been here since the 40s or earlier. But now we have an influx of people from Puebla, Mexico, and from Guatemala and other places. So there's a really big Hispanic presence in the neighborhood. And historically, it was Scandinavian, Irish, Italian, all the people who worked on the docks. At one point, 30,000 longshoremen a day walked from their house down to the waterfront, made bowling balls and worked on ships and, had boxing matches and things. And, and that's only a generation ago. So I don't want people to think it's olden times. So this is a neighborhood that's constantly reinventing itself with immigrant energy.
Yeah.
And that's not new. That's 4 or 5 generations back of like immigrant populations coming in and making the best of it in Sunset Park.
And that's a lot of New York in a nutshell, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're all attracted to it, is that sense of resilience and hoping to feed off of that and stay in the fight ourselves. Yeah. Cool. We're going to take our first break. We're going to come back in just a minute. All right. So hang tight, David. Everybody listening, hang tight too. We'll be right back.
Here.
Okay, folks, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, happy Friday. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. Today, we are speaking with the executive director of the 5th Ave Sunset Park BID, David Estrada. He was just giving a little background on what a BID actually is a business and improvement district, and where the funding comes from in form of taxes, and what the BID represents in terms of the community, and a little background on himself and the community he's servicing here in Brooklyn, home to the 3rd largest but fastest growing Chinatown in New York City, historically immigrant neighborhood. Scrappy, I think, was the word you used to describe the workers of that area. I think it's a pretty good description.
Scrappy, pugnacious, moxie. Picture
moxie.
Yeah.
Like that. And I also like how you said. We were talking about the message of the show and the idea of business mortality and the idea of starvation as an added pressure to some of the things that get in the way of a business's success. So there's this idea, the concept came from a presentation. I think it was a TED Talk that Simon Sinek was doing, and he was saying, a lot of businesses, that fail, they cite things like market forces, being undercapitalized, things like that, for the reason that they didn't make it. But further exploration points to maybe that it's internal mechanisms where, sure, you need to have enough capital, but if your operational costs are too high, maybe capital is not what you need. Maybe you need to reassess your operational costs and the psychological warfare that kind of happens. But the ante has been upped, and this idea of being starved, literally. I mean, everybody's kind of running around skinny, but that's where that scrappiness, I think, helps out. I mean, we were talking earlier about how, if you run and opened a business in New York City, you've been through like 15 rounds because they're coming at you from all angles.
That last scene in Raging Bull.
Right.
But I mean, this talk, right? I want to bring it down to like where the people I serve live, right? Like, people like, I'm undercapitalized, my internal process controls and my HR mechanism.
What's that?
Really? I mean, all true, yes, but pretty highfalutin when you're running a vegetable shop on 54th Street and Fifth Avenue. That's just pure hustle.
Yeah.
These people are sometimes unbanked. They do not have access to capital. They didn't get PPP and idle loans and relief. It's a different world. Like this is, everybody points to this sector, this retail sector, and let's not even say small business. Let's say micro business. Fewer than 5 employees, and 2 of them are your cousins, and the other 3 are under the table, right? So this is real world stuff, and everybody points to this as the economic engine, and the employment creator and the job creators and all this stuff. They're not getting all this, all this support. They're not operating in a realm where they sit down and, let's have a thoughtful discussion about our internal controls. It's like, hey, the truck's double parked, get the stuff, right? So, there's just a human element that really inspires me every day. But I'm also very afraid of when it might run out, because everybody talks about consumer sentiment, right? That's a pretty clear concept. But who's going to talk about entrepreneurial sentiment, the feeling to do it, right? It's not dollars and cents and internal controls. You have to want to get up in the morning and go roll up that steel door, and receive. You have to want it, because it's not the money.
Yeah.
It's not that people are making it easy for you, and nobody's coming around and patting you on the shoulder saying, that a boy, you kept your vegetable store open, or you kept your dress shop open. Nobody's doing that. You have to want it. And so my fear is that just the help is so long coming, and the urgency is so great, that people who might otherwise have survived in their business will fail because they're exhausted. They're just tired, much less being ill. We've lost store owners, and we've lost folks to COVID. And these are family affairs, so when, Papa passes, the shop is closed, and
or even if they get sick, if there's an instance that one person tests positive and you've got 5 people working there and they're all working together every day, all of a sudden everybody's got it's right. Unbelievable, the domino effect.
These are frontline workers in the truest sense of the word. They put food on families' tables. They clothe our children. They provide the prescriptions that we need for all the other stuff that's going on in our lives. And they have been taken for granted for a long time. But now, oh, what do you know? We're dependent on these people, and we need them. And I just don't want us to have collective amnesia when stuff gets better, and it will, for you and me as John Q. citizen, probably in that, June, July, August timeframe, stuff's going to get a lot better. But we will have lost a lot of businesses along the way. And I do not want to forget who we needed the most when this problem rolled through our lives.
Absolutely. And for me, I'm kind of occupy this space between the two where, like, I go to Jetro's and I'm in line with these guys and they're literally counting the cash that they made the day before to buy what they're going to sell today. And I'm like, that's serious. And
I've been there. I mean, this is, you don't have terms with your purveyor.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cash and carry. I have guys, the guy standing there with the truck, and he's got the clipboard, the boxes are in there. The hand is out. It's like, show me that, show me the cash, or there's no terms. What are you talking about? These people, when they talk about business relief, especially at the federal and state level, but even in the city, I don't even think New York City, which loves these businesses so much, even has a clear notion of what it is, right? I mean, they just don't, there's just a reality gap between how it feels on the ground. And you run essentially retail storefront operations that rely on foot traffic and deal with all these things. So I think you experience it personally. And I'm watching it as this sort of coach and ambassador. Just while we were on break, I got a text from my community affairs officer at the 72nd precinct. And he says, what happened to a nice boutique? It's a dress store that's been there for like 25 years.
Yeah.
Quinceañera dresses and beauty. He goes, I need the big chair for a Sweet 16. And I'm like, dude, they're gone.
Yeah.
So this hurts,
It definitely does. And I think it's really important what you were saying about not having collective amnesia. I mean, one of the goals of this particular broadcast, like this show, is to be an archive for that and to be a constant reminder, just like a woodpecker. And that needs to be picked up more, I think, from within the community or from within some of these services, like, you know, whether it's a bid or I don't know what else is there in these communities that could provide that, like even just a form of a weekly broadcast on like Facebook Live or whatever. I mean, you know, all of these organizations have, is it the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce? Like, I know they've been talking about, I've got a few friends in there and talking about getting a podcast together to deal with some of these issues. But I think that's like the real way. It's just
I mean, the Chambers of Commerce, especially Queens, but especially Brooklyn, have really stepped up. So they're doing good, and those are not taxpayer-funded organizations. Those are subscription clubs, you know. So they're, you know, but I mean, I admire them because they've opened their doors to everybody, and a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have, you know, encountered them. They're great. I don't think it's going to come from city government or state government anytime soon. I mean, we have a state and a city administrations that don't seem to get along, and it's just, I mean, look, New York City decides that indoor dining is not possible right now because of the pandemic. Okay, I give you that. But if you happen to have a day with weather that's good enough for someone to eat outside, they're not going to allow them to walk into the restaurant to go use the bathroom and wash their hands, right? Because of the way the law is written. So they have to actually go back. It's in the news today. They have to go back and say, well, we're going to consider softening this regulation. You come up with these things that just aren't operating in the realm of reality from the get-go, you know, and so. That's where our voices are kind of important, and you got to be in there sort of, you know, yakking and testifying and talking to the press and just telling anybody, just screaming from the rooftops, you know, please just make sense.
Yeah. Is there any form of broadcast that's happening like with regularity for your bid or any of the other neighboring bids?
I wouldn't say there's something that's a general broadcast thing that's applicable across the board. We have people in very different sectors, different language and cultural affinities and so forth, and especially different scale of business. So what I observe is people are sort of self-identifying into smaller groups where, like, the Queens Chamber of Commerce will run something about accessing federal aid, but they'll pick up doing the Chinese language version, you know, or the you know, the Manhattan Chamber will be running something that might be more geared towards central business district and larger corporate settings, but the Brooklyn Chamber will run some sessions that are good for smaller storefronts. Like we did a fundraising campaign for small loans to bring back Brooklyn Fund, because the Brooklyn Chamber happens to have a community designated financial institution that can, you know, state chartered, and they can offer loans and things to small businesses, but micro loans. I mean, sometimes the difference between just surviving another month and not is, you know, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, because most of our small businesses are extremely rent burdened.
Yeah.
So when something rolls down like PPP, which was focused on payroll sustaining, it's like, what does that mean when, like, you own the place and you're the only employee and you're paying yourself minimum wage just to stay on the books, and you're paying, you know, $18,000 a month in rent for a tiny storefront and you have no cash flow? Payroll protection doesn't help you.
Yeah.
And, oh, do you want to take on debt? No.
I know.
No personal guarantee. Am I going to take on debt to survive this? No. So, you know, we really need more focused aid in the form of direct grants and relief that are geared towards the smallest businesses. I mean, if Applebee's games the system, or, you know, one of these big chains, I'm not surprised. You know, we all wring our hands, but it's not surprising. But
no, not at all.
Come down here to the neighborhood and help some of us survive. You know, just survive. We don't want sweet. We just want to survive.
Exactly. All right, let's take another quick break. I want to pick back up with this idea of the PPP, especially in the small grants, because a number of things have come down the pipe, and some have worked and some have not, and kind of dissect that a little bit in the next segment. All right, so hang tight, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. Today, we are talking to David Estrada. He is the executive director of the Ave Sunset Park BID here in Brooklyn, New York. We've been talking about commerce, Speaking of, I'm sitting in my restaurant, Della, alone. I've gotten a liquor delivery and a seafood delivery during the show, and nobody's been here to receive it. So these guys are just like rolling in and dropping stuff. I've got like 3 cases of champagne right next to me. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Commerce in action, and it's scrappy. It is. I really like that scrappiness though. I want to grow and get to certain levels, but I was listening to a podcast by another a friend who's been on the show as well. He has his own show, and he had this guy on, and he was like, you always, like, the best business guys keep their what did he say? They stay close to the dirt. That's what he said. Got to stay close to the dirt.
You can outgrow yourself. You can sometimes, because the stuff that sets us in motion isn't always what sustains us. You might evolve and grow into it. Why not? Go ahead. But for a lot of folks, I think, it's that being able to see the results of what you've done, in the course of a day, right? Like it's that constant flow of sort of challenge and gratification when you succeed. Like that's a thrill. It's a thrill.
It is.
It's like sports. I don't follow sports, but I watch these guys in there slugging every day. And it's pretty entertaining. Yeah.
No, you're right though. Like, even when I just am like rolling into a commercial district, the hair on my neck stands up. I'm like, like I just have this.
What's going on? Who's opening?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy nature too, but not as much as I enjoy transaction. Like I'll go to refresh, and then I'm like, okay, can we go back and get to work now? So on the last segment, we were talking about, the PPP and the grants and the little bit it would really take to offer survival and not starvation to some of these businesses, as we mentioned earlier. I was thinking when they started doling them out at first, like here at Della, we got nothing. We didn't get a penny. It's 9 months in and we didn't get a penny, and we just got scrappy and pulled it together. And when I was hearing about like the Lakers getting an $8 million loan, I'm like, bro, if you gave me 20 grand, I'd do a backflip. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's not I mean, these are limited pots of money. So in some ways it is a zero-sum game. And when someone gets more, someone else gets less. When someone gets shut out, someone else eats it up. So that is true. On the other hand, I don't want the Lakers to fire their staff. That's fine. That's okay. But don't leave out, like, what we need is an and, not an either or, but for a lot of these businesses, I'm sorry, it presumes that you have generally accepted accounting practices, that you have an accountant,
right?
That you have a relationship with a bank that happens to be the bank that's serving federal business relief loans, and that you're at the front of the line with that bank. A lot of these folks, their interaction with the local branch is to get change.
I know.
So like right from the beginning, the basic design of federal relief was the original sin was flowing it through these financial institutions that then immediately, through understandable self-interest, pick and choose the loans that are going to be least administrative overhead and most profitable to serve, right? So it's not based on interest rate, it's just based on internals and all that, right? So like anybody who was thinking about it from our point of view would have looked at that and said, okay, that's good for them, but what about us, right? So maybe after January, we'll see a little bit of what about us. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. And you mentioned earlier, and this was my basic premise all along too, like, I don't need a loan. I don't want, like, as a small business, like, the last thing I need is another loan. And that was most of what was being offered. Now, I do remember through Brad Lander's office in over here. Brad,
council member,
yeah. Is he the council member of Sunset Park as well?
No, that's Carlos Menchaca. So they're adjacent districts.
Right. They border. I knew they were close, but they were doing, I think it was like an $8,000 loan at 1% interest or something like that, and maybe it was like specifically for female-owned organizations or something like that. It was something like very specific and small, like what you were talking about, but still, it was a loan.
Yeah, but not a grant. And they're undercapitalized, so it's kind of like we'll advertise it, but it's almost like the lotto making the application for it.
Yeah,
and those are things. And to their credit, these things happen very quickly and early on with New York City government and what few funds they could rearrange
Right.
to try to offer some immediate relief before we understood the span of time that the pandemic recovery would require, right? So then comes the state and some other, and the federal stuff, again, off topic and hard for our folks to access. And that had bigger pools of money, but much higher bar to acquire.
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of it's coming in the form of debt. Some new loans just opened up for MWBEs in, they call them LMI communities, low and moderate income communities here in New York, right? It's a federally designated, level of need in a community. But again, those are loans. They're probably up to $10,000, $20,000, but also they require a personal guarantee. So at the same time that the state and the city have said, okay, we're going to prohibit personal guarantees on commercial leases, they're saying, oh, but if you want this business assistance, put your home on the line to save your store. Put your children's education on the line to save your store that we think we want to save, but you take the risk. Sorry, no.
And how many of the people in your bid even have that? I mean, how many of them have something that they can use as a personal guarantor?
Right. It's New York. We don't have a high rate of home ownership, and people aren't sitting on assets in that. It's just a different style. So
what are you going to put up? Your delivery van? That's about all.
Right. Those are sweet headphones, my friend. They're worth something. You gotta put them on the line there.
Those are from my old recording engineer days. A lifetime ago, but they work really nice for this purpose.
I think looking forward though, things are going to get better. There will have been a lot of loss along the way that was needless. Some businesses that maybe maybe there was an oversaturation of discount cell phone stores or nail salons. This isn't a new conversation in New York about the richness and variety of retail mix, and who are taking leases and long-term vacancy in commercial spaces. This is not new. But I think now we're going to have an opportunity in the next year or two to reinvent how our neighborhoods are. And some of these borough-based commercial neighborhood strips are going to be at an advantage because we have smaller footprints, easier leases, non-corporate landlords who can make a rational decision even if they're taking a risk with you for a while. So I'm thinking, we might actually have an advantage in a place like Sunset Park, leasing back up in recovery compared to, say, 34th Street in Manhattan or some downtown Brooklyn. So look to the small places for those little sprouts of growth after the Great Forest Fire, to see where is the richness going to come next, and we have to be ready for that too.
100%. It's interesting because I've heard a lot of stories of people dealing with the smaller landlords right now. And it's unfortunate because it seems to me like kind of the modus operandi has been to give a very difficult time to the previous leaseholder. So if you were the leaseholder coming in to the pandemic, the terms didn't change. It was like, fuck you, pay me, and that was it. But then, that person leaves because of course they can't, their business has been shut down or limited for months on end. And then the new person signing the lease, all of a sudden there's like this partnership.
Let me give you 3 months free and we'll taper your lease structure over the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, because the landlords, again, non-corporate landlords, this is not the Tishman of the world. These are family trusts. These are people who've owned it since their dad ran the
hardware store or whatever.
These are 3 little apartments above a store, classic stuff. And it's a mixed bag. Some of those landlords themselves are pretty leveraged or, are not sitting on means, and property tax hasn't gone away, so they're at risk. Others have a little bit of a cushion and they're saying, all right, I'll give you enough room to operate. You've been here a while. I want to survive through this with you. But that's on a case-by-case basis and based on personal relationships. There's been a lot of real estate speculation in South Brooklyn in the last cycle, which was hot real estate. So you have a lot of these people who came in and picked up properties and are not from the community and do not have personal relationships with their tenants and work through a broker to get some national retail brand after warehousing a storefront for a year and a half. And they don't have that old Brooklyn, hey, it's you and me. We'll sort it out later. Push it over the horizon. We'll take care of this. They don't have that. So that's where you see some holes in the fabric of the neighborhood. But we're doing good out here because a lot of these people aren't going to work in Manhattan.
I know. I was going to say that.
Honestly, foot traffic, that's what my mom taught me in old retail days. Yeah, go to the mall. Don't look at people. Look at the bags. You know, is anybody buying anything? And I'm telling you, we are not a destination shopping neighborhood. We are a walk to shop and go home neighborhood for people who live within blocks of where they're shopping. So actually, we have problems with crowding on the sidewalk. We have problems with crowding in retail stores, you know, whereas, you know, the tumbleweeds are rolling through Midtown.
Exactly.
And that pattern is going to sustain over time to some extent, although most of these people are service industry and wage workers who, when the economy kicks up, they're going to have to pick up their shifts again and get back to work.
Right. But a certain amount of tension, like you said, it's been about survival. But there's in places and instances where you weren't necessarily making extra money, you know, and getting ahead financially, you were getting ahead in the attention game. And a lot of that's going to stick because people are a product of their habits. So if you've been going to, you know, this new place, you know, a place that you didn't go to before because you were working in the city and now you're kind of home or you had to adjust your situation, a lot of those habits are going to remain. And especially if you service people really well in an intimate way and make connections through this, they will be loyal to you no matter where they're going or what they're doing.
It'll come from people power upward like that, just because people are creatures of habit and they're also rational. They make good decisions about what's most efficient. And it's going to come from above because you already hear the corporations are going to give up leaseholds. You know, we're overbuilt on office space and so forth.
Oh my God.
Some of the old values about everybody congregating for the publishing industry or the flower district or this or that, you know, whatever generation of Manhattan you want to talk about, those were already eroding rapidly.
Yeah.
And you know, when I moved to Brooklyn 35 years ago, everything was pointed back towards Manhattan, you know, fun and work and everything else, you know, and as the years have gone by, you know, every once in a while you wake up and you go, should we go to the city? Nah, it's, you know, we got it here.
Such a hassle.
Brooklyn is the third or fourth largest city in the nation by itself. Thank you. Absent the mistake in '98 when we joined those other boroughs that I've heard of once in a while. So that, you know, the joy and the thrill and the visual stunning quality and the emotional impact of the central business district won't disappear, but it's, you know, ever dominant place on top of the whole world of work probably won't be the same for our kids as it was for us.
Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. All right, let's take one more quick break. We'll come back and we'll wrap this one up. So hang tight, everybody. We'll be right back. All right, guys, we're going to wrap this show up for today. Last round. Here we go. We're speaking to David Estrada. Once again, he is the executive director of the Fifth Ave Sunset Park BID here in Brooklyn, New York. Great discussion about small business entrepreneurship. Yeah, I love how how did you phrase it? The entrepreneurial, did you say the entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial something earlier?
Oh, consumer sentiment is the base idea, but nobody talks about entrepreneurial sentiment. Like the feel, I'm talking about feelings here. Like this, it's a little,
write that down.
It's a little taboo, you know, but we do talk about passion and the love for doing it and the emotions of running a business. And as tight as your ledger book needs to be or your business plan, you've got to have that joy of doing it or you're not going to sustain, you know.
And that goes back to what Simon Sinek was saying. It's like, you know, that's where the mortality comes from. If you don't have that, if like you're really just doing this for money, your shelf life is limited. Where if it's coming from within,
let's not discount. Some people, that's the passion. If you do
I understand. I get it. I get it.
And you make a lot of money, I'm going to stand there and applaud. Good. I mean, don't be a jerk along the way. But you know, I mean, everybody's got something different. I heard in one of your earlier segments talking about trying to teach entrepreneurship, right? And I don't think you can teach that entrepreneurial spirit, the origin of it. But I think you can teach people to make an open-eyed assessment of their marketplace and competition and whether their plan makes sense. And if they have the personal, just to do a self-inventory about whether you have that care in you, that both joy and anger, you know, that makes you get up and run a business when everything seems like it's against you. I mean, that you can't teach having it, but you can teach people stopping long enough to make an honest assessment about whether that's for them. And I think that's where a lot of folks run off the cliff, because they've got the beginnings of the passion, but not the other stuff that needs to sustain the work.
And as we talked about before, I think you called it the forest fire. It's done that in the physical realm, but it's also doing that in the sentimental realm as well, because we're getting to see like all the people who really didn't have that. They're like, yep, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. And I can't say wholesale, but I have seen evidence that a lot of the new people that are coming in, they have, maybe it's still honeymoon period, but they have that vigor and they're kind of going for it, because it takes that to do, to open a business in a pandemic. I mean, I know a few guys that have opened like several during this time. They're just going after it.
Put this in my neighborhood, little tiny place, seafood restaurant, El Rey de Pescado, King of Fish, right on like 46th Street. They were just building out during the pandemic when everything shut down. I mean, they were doing things like fighting to get that last fire inspection on the suppression system in the kitchen, or the sign off from DOB on the seating capacity, right when all the field staff for those agencies went into pandemic.
Disappeared.
Right? I mean, they're the worst weather ever, and they managed to open. I mean, my God, I look at these guys and I'm like, I would have walked away.
Yeah,
I would have walked away. And they just stayed at it, and they're open, and they're not this week while we're closed for indoor dining, but I mean, they're making a go of it.
Yeah.
So.
But I myself, I mean, if you would have told me, at the beginning of March, the circumstances I would have to operate under for the next 9 months, I would have been like, we'll be closed in 2 weeks. Yeah. and it's 9 months later, and like, I feel great. I mean, it sucked, but I'm grateful for the experience and for what, and I bet a lot of business owners will say the same in hindsight. Like, that was awful, but it will probably poise them for like much better success. So, there's this idea that the forest fire didn't kill everything, like some strong roots will be there, and that's going to like fire up. And then,
we'll get hot. We'll get hot again. That's the
it always does.
And you're not selling dry goods on a shelf that don't expire. You're not. Yeah. You're selling perishables in a social setting. A restaurant's just a complicated thing. It's just and so it's not like you can roll the door down and just wait a while.
Right.
You need flow.
And that's, I wanted to hit on this because we talked about it the other day, and it's the elephant in the room. Like, they're saying, just wait, pare everything down. And there's been very little in terms of like real assistance. There's been talk. I've heard like another round of PPP loans are coming out, but they're designated for certain industries, and it's not really for small retail and small service industry outposts. So how are we supposed to do that? It just really makes no sense. And you've been in a lot of conversations around that. We've got about 4 minutes left. What's your kind of your burning fire exit statement for for the people?
If I had the answer, I'd be bored with it all over town. No, I think the folks who have the chance. Okay, let me say this, not to the entrepreneurs, but to the rest of us who are listening. We have real power about which small businesses die or survive in our neighborhoods. And I'm in with everybody else. I got a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's Christmas. I just can't. A bunch of Amazon boxes have rolled into my house. But honestly, every time you walk into a shop and you spend $1, I don't care what it is, all of us, the dollars that stay in our economy are going to be what keeps these stores open. And so, the neighborhoods themselves, the populace of the neighborhoods will have to decide that this is what they want. And yes, online ordering and national retail brands and large discount box stores and all of those things are going to be a factor. But especially in a dense urban setting like New York City, you can change it. Collectively, we can change it, and it doesn't take a lot of money or effort. And it might be a little while before we feel comfortable getting out and acting on that. But I think anyone who's run a small business knows at the end of the day, and you run that report on the register and you look at the number that comes up at the bottom of the tape, and you're like, I just barely made it today. Oh, thank God. Or, oh, hell, I'm deeper in the hole. You know, and sometimes that's a matter of, you know, $200 or $300, one way or the other in a long retail workday. So please, I mean, that's, if I have one thing to say to anybody, and even to entrepreneurs who are listening here, keep repeating that.
Yeah.
Because again, like that amnesia about forgetting frontline workers, we're frontline consumers. I'm sorry, it's our culture. We're frontline consumers. And, you know, New Yorkers don't like to be told to sit still and stay at home. So when the time comes, you know, take your pennies and go. And if you can't buy something, walk in them and tell them that you want to. That's, you know, I can't tell you what it means to know that someone cares.
Absolutely. I've gotten many phone calls and just people stopping me on the street along the way. And even if they didn't spend any money, just to say, like, I'm really glad to see you're still there. We will make it in soon. And even a conversation like this, you got me pumped up, man. You know, it's like, this needs to keep happening and repeat itself. That's why I was asking about the broadcast. Like, if there was a way for this to just get channeled over and over and over again, this conversation, it's the moral currency that a lot of us need.
Right. And look, that works. If you're in New York City, we're talking, this is a New York conversation at the moment, and a Brooklyn one at that, right? But listen, I'm a child of the suburbs. My family's from West Texas. I'm from Southern California. This works wherever you are. Yeah. There is a place. There's that little shop in the strip mall that's been there 40 years that you barely think about twice when you're driving to Costco. I don't badmouth a big box store or anybody, but I'm just saying, like, everything has its place. And I'm not asking anyone to give themselves a bad deal or spend money they wouldn't spend otherwise. But just that little decision, maybe it takes a couple more minutes. Maybe you only can choose between 7 items instead of 17, but you're gonna get what you want, you know? So it really makes a difference. It's true, you know? So just keep that faith in terms of the, you know, the flow of love and money that's going into the businesses we're trying to save. And
then don't forget it when things open back up, because those stores will still be there, and their plight will be the same regardless. It'll be everything old is new again, but maybe we'll learn something. You know, you and I are going to remember, but definitely. I don't know about anybody else. Well, we're going to do our best. Well, thank you, man, so much. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and just amazing things you shared with us today. So I really appreciate it. If anybody wants to get in touch with you to learn more, what's the best way for someone to contact you? Just David at sunsetparkbid.org. Just give me a call, look us up, come around. We're on the Avenue, you know. Come spend some money. Real life. Look, we hang holiday lights, we pick up trash, we do things, we put up Christmas trees. Life is continuing. It goes on. You can hear it in the background. So it's holiday season, and we will come out of this. We will. 100%. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. The rest of you have a great weekend. Peace out.